pose you the question of unintended consequences. What connects the bacteriologist Robert Koch, Marshall Tito's holiday home and holiday resort, and James Bond's Italian tailor, someone who was surely licensed to kill? Now, this is all a bit of fun, but I think there is a much more serious undertone to it. It shows the impact that science, medical science, can have on the worlds of high society, on fashion, and on film and popular culture. Now, the short answer to the question I posed is the islands of Brioni, the Croatian national park in the Adriatic. A beauty spot, a very noted beauty spot, and a very exclusive place even today. But it was not always so. In 1894, the archipelago of these islands was bought by Paul Kupelwieser, a Viennese businessman. He bought them from the Austro-Hungarian Navy, and his aim was to establish a holiday resort, a seaside for the upper class of the capital city of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was to be exclusive, an exclusive beach resort. But there was just one problem. It was a major problem. The islands were malarial. In fact, on one of his visits, Kupelwieser himself contracted the illness and had to go to London for treatment. Well, at that time, the noted bacteriologist Robert Koch was about to begin a project on malaria. A research project on malaria, mainly centred on the Far East, but it was also to include Italy. Koch was a very distinguished man. He discovered the causes of TB and of cholera, and he was to be awarded the 1905 Nobel Prize for Medicine for his work. He also is very important and in fact central to the development of the study of bacterial infections and how they are caused. With Koch's postulates, he put forward the basis of how a particular infection could be identified, how the bacteria causing a particular illness could be identified. Once identified, then you could look at ways of dealing with it. Well, in the first case, the first of his postulates was that the identified microorganism must be present in every case of a particular illness. Secondly, it must be possible to isolate the microorganism and grow it in a pure culture. Then the cultured microorganism should be able to be inoculated, and cause a similar infection if induced into a healthy patient, healthy subject. Then finally, it had to be possible to isolate that microorganism again from the inoculated experimental test case and identify it as being exactly identical to the original specific causative agent. Only when all of these conditions were present could it be said that an infection was caused by a particular microorganism. Well, Koch sent a couple of his research team to the Brioni Islands, and he visited them himself in both 1900 and 1901. He soon identified the cause of malaria on the islands as the Anopheles mosquito, which had multicolored wings. And having identified the causative agent, it was possible for him to find a solution. Now, at that time, Koch was engaged in this very serious, very bitter argument with Robert Ross, who was to gain his name in the field of the eradication of malaria, or at least his attempts to eradicate it. Ross's approach was to exterminate the mosquito. Koch, however, believed that a complete quinonization of a sick population would prevent further outbreaks of the disease. By preventing the mosquitoes from absorbing the parasites which were in human blood. He was against such measures as draining swamps. The isolated nature of the Brioni archipelago gave him the opportunity to try out his ideas. Anyone infected was treated with quinine, which was then one of the regular ways of treating malaria. In fact, one of the few ways. But he was successful. He insisted that there be no draining of bogs or morasses or any attempt to eliminate the mosquito. He had a very close geographical area which was ideal for this type of epidemiological research. He was successful. And Koppelweiser erected a monument in 1908 in one of the quarries on the island to commemorate the eradication of malaria. Only once he had shown that treatment with quinine was successful did Koch agree that the ponds and marshes should be drained and the swamps be backfilled with soil to eradicate malaria. So he was actually using Robert Ross's methods to ensure that malaria was a thing of the past on the Brioni Islands. Well, it it was a great success. And soon Kupelwieser was able to develop Brioni as the luxury resort he wished for. The resort soon became fashionable with Austro-Hungarian high society. There were 5 hotels. There were heated swimming pools with seawater. Parks, forests, and archaeological sites were developed. There was even a zoo and an ostrich farm. All of this was aided by good water, sea connections to Pula and to other Adriatic ports, which were linked to Vienna by fast trains. One of the highlights was a visit from the Kaiser of Germany. Well, the resort suffered during the Great War, and in 1918, the islands became part of Italy, no longer part of anything approximating to what was left of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For a time, things went well. And then in 1930, Karl Kupelwieser, son of Paul, son of the founder of this luxury resort, went bankrupt. And the whole of the islands was acquired by the Italian government. Despite all of this, in the interwar years, Brioni became a byword for luxury. Its luxurious reputation continued. Elegant society flocked to it and danced the night away in black tie, or if they were being informal. If they wanted a more formal experience, they went in for white tie balls. There were tea dances. There was an emphasis on a healthy lifestyle and sport. Tennis club was set up, there was a golf club, and Brioni became famous for its polo matches and polo club and polo competitions. And that was to become important later on. Well, the islands were publicised with posters which depicted the sporting life and showed a polo player. The Second World War was perhaps even less kind to the island resort than the first had been. After 1947, Brioni was now part of Yugoslavia. In that year, 1947, Marshal Joseph Tito, leader of Yugoslavia, first visited Brioni. And in 1953, the White House was to become his official residence. Here, he had his own zoo, and he hosted such luminaries as Che Guevara, Alberto Moravia, Sophia Loren, Gina Lollobrigida, Elizabeth Taylor. The politicians and world leaders also came. Haile Selassie, Nasser, Fidel Castro, Ho Chi Minh, Nikita Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev, and Nikolai Ceausescu. He and his wife liked anything that denoted luxury. It was at the White House that the Brioni Declaration was signed on the 19th of July 1956, which laid the foundations of the non-aligned movement in politics. Tito, Nehru, and Nasser were the main signatories. So, this once luxury resort, formerly a malarial swamp, had become a centre of high politics. It's interesting to remember too that in 1991, on the 7th of July, the Brioni Agreement was also signed on the island under European Union sponsorship to try to create an environment by which the republics of Slovenia, Croatia, and what was left of Yugoslavia could negotiate on the future of the former Yugoslavia. This very much established the European Union as a peace broker. So, the island, after the fall of Yugoslavia, became a Croatian national park. And after the wars of succession in the former Yugoslavia had ended, resumed its place as a luxury resort, an exclusive one. But throughout the years, the islands retained the aura of luxury and exclusiveness. So much so that when in 1945, a bespoke men's tailoring firm in Rome was founded by Nazzareno Fonticoli and Gaetano Sabini, they wanted a name that would denote luxury and a pre-war elegance. What else could they go for but Brioni? And indeed, on the linings of their suits, they still have the image of the polo player who advertised the islands on posters in the 1930s. It was such a luxurious image, made a wonderful trademark. Indeed, in 2004, the firm of Brioni was to sponsor a series of polo matches once again. Brioni suits are worn by the business community. They are seen as a mark of success. They are luxurious, they are comfortable, they are handmade, and they are not for the masses. Though Donald Trump, unsuccessfully, has tried to show that he is a master of the universe by wearing such a suit. In his case, it doesn't come off. Well, these very expensive suits, a bespoke suit could go for between £6,000 and £47,000. Even an off-the-peg one would start at about 3,500 and upwards. And they are made in a factory in Penne in the Abruzzo. Their 900 tailors create 200 new models a year. So new suit designs, The fabrics are limited, and so someone is buying something really special. 25% of that output is for an elite of 25,000 clients. There's said to be more than 5,000 stitches in each jacket. And on a tuxedo, such as worn by James Bond, there would be more than 10,000 hand stitches. So it's fashion not for the masses, but for the elite. And in the 1950s and 60s, Brioni suits were popular with such film stars as Clark Gable, Rock Hudson, Henry Fonda, Anthony Quinn, and even Peter Sellers, and the unlikely figure of John Wayne. So, where does the James Bond connection come in? Certainly in Ian Fleming's novels, James Bond is dressed in Fleet Street, as you'd expect from a former naval officer. However, between 1995 and 2006, Brioni supplied the suits worn by the actors playing James Bond on film. Firstly by Pierce Brosnan in GoldenEye in 1995, and most recently and lastly by Daniel Craig in Casino Royale in 2006. These suits were designed by Brioni, but Roman tailoring, and Brioni in particular, took their inspiration from Savile Row, which in turn had adopted some of the style of classic naval uniform, so very appropriate for Commander Bond, a former naval officer. Well, even after the Brioni franchise of supplying suits to the Bond films ended, Brioni provided suits for actors such as Morgan Freeman, Richard Gere, and Tom Hanks in a number of films, including Angels and Demons. So, James Bond in film has an Italian tailor. His individual tailor was one of the master tailors of the firm of Brioni, Angelo Petrucci. And Petrucci later said, "It is a rare client who needs, for example, a special pocket for Walter PPK, Bond's weapon of choice. For Daniel Craig, we also had a special pocket for his knife." So, these were indeed special suits. Now, when you think about it, these all seem unlikely links. And talking about them, it's all been a bit of fun. But I think it does show the far-reaching effects that bacteriology and medicine can have. And it all started with the draining of malarial swamps in an age of optimism when it was believed that microbial infection could be conquered. Now, Kupelwieser might have liked the idea that his vision of a luxury resort for the Brioni Islands was to be carried forth by an exclusive elitist tailor. I'm sure Koch would have had no conception of that. But his work was to lead just to that. So perhaps there's a case for the best dressed bacteriologist, the best dressed doctors. And come on, let's also say for the well-dressed medical historian. And certainly, if Brioni would like to sponsor me, then I'm up for a nice suit.